Welcome to the Investor's Playbook, your voice in Scottsdale and Paradise Valley luxury real estate. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, consider this your edge. And now, your host, Frank DiMaggio. It's time!
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Investor's Playbook. I am your host, Frank DiMaggio, and with us this week, a very special guest, Nick Toon, founder of Toon Co. Nick is such a unique guest for us because he's probably the only other person in this market who kind of does what I do. So Nick is not only a real estate agent at the highest level, but is also a builder himself and a developer. And on previous episodes, we've talked about how we think that's really the key differentiator. So Nick, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Nick and I actually have a lot more in common than people would know besides the real estate world. We were both professional athletes. Our dads were both professional athletes, actually, in the NFL. My dad played in Canada and everything else, nowhere near Nick's dad, Al Toon, who was in the Jets Hall of Fame, and my dad was actually a huge fan of.
Yep.
I think that sports background definitely leads to that competitive nature that definitely translates into the business world, no matter what you're in. So let's just kind of kick it off from there. How do you think your sports background has kind of affected your business success so far?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is something I talk about all the time. You know, there's so many attributes in athletics that, I mean, as you know, carry over into the business world. And you really don't, I mean, at least I didn't when I was in the athletic realm. I didn't understand how much of those skills and the things that I was learning, you know, while I was in athletics were going to carry over, you know, into the business world. But, you know, you learn how to work with a team. You learn how to be coachable. You know, unless you're in an individual sport. But there's all of those, you know, intangibles that you learn in athletics that carry over. And I think the people that have success in business and decide to get into business that have competed at a high level in athletics have a great, you know, head start, you know, when they get into the business world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, one of the places that we're a little bit different is kind of how we got into the real estate world. So when I got into the real estate world, I actually started as a builder and then morphed into also doing the real estate side.
Yep.
I think you kind of started the other way, right? You started as a real estate agent and then kind of morphed into the building side.
I started really on the investment side. So I wasn't building at the time, but I started as an investor. So we had, you know, acquired a number of rental properties, had, you know, 5-6 vacation rentals out here in Scottsdale. I had built and remodeled a few homes. My wife actually was licensed. My wife Annie was licensed before I was. She actually got licensed in New Orleans when I was still playing. You know, she you know, wasn't sure what she wanted to do. I'm like, why don't you just get your real estate license? So she ended up getting licensed in Louisiana at the time. And then you know, when I retired, when we moved to Arizona, she got licensed in Arizona. I hadn't gotten licensed at the time. I actually got licensed in 2017, I think. But I started investing in real estate in like 2013, 14. So I had a, you know, background on the investment side before I got licensed. I actually never intended on getting my real estate license, just similar to you. It became a necessary evil. You know, we're doing all these transactions. I'm like, you know what, let me just get my license. And then, you know, from there, you know, built some relationships and, you know, we've definitely scaled, you know, the retail side of the business as well. It's been, you know, been great. But yeah, I mean, I think there's so many positives to being licensed, but I know we'll get into this later. You know, just being licensed is rapidly becoming, you know, something that I don't think is going to be sustainable, you know, for long term, you know, for people that want to continue to excel in this space.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast a lot is that, especially when you're talking about the ultra luxury level, really the game that we're playing in the Scottsdale and Paradise Valley market, you know, you've got these players that have been in the game for quite a while and they've done a great job. But as the internet has interfered with our business and started to really give so much information to the consumers, they're looking at us and saying, okay, you still need to create quite a bit of value for me to utilize you.
Yep.
What value do you bring me now that I've got all this information? And I think the evolution of the luxury real estate agent is you also need to be an investor. You also need to be in the building world so that you can bring those added benefits to the transaction, because there's so many things that as a real estate agent, you actually need that knowledge. 100%. You actually need those connections. So, you know, that's been our platform. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's mind blowing to me. There's a lot of great agents out there, but there's so many agents that don't, they sell houses for a living, right? But they don't actually understand everything that encompasses a home. And being in the building realm and being a builder, and having gone through that process, being an investor, putting your money where your mouth is, I think are all huge things. I look at this from the perspective of, okay, if I'm an individual, coming to an agent, I call up, Joe Schmo that, has never built a house, doesn't understand real estate on the investment side, doesn't understand the components of the home. If I'm a home buyer looking to spend, 10 or 15 million, you got Joe Schmo that, just sells real estate. And then you have guys, like you and I that, sell real estate at a high level, but also understand, all these other important factors, when it comes to, not only purchasing real estate, but, on the build side, understanding, okay, what does the process look like? What should we be looking out for? What are the things that, as a home buyer, if I'm going to purchase a home that's already completed, there's many things that you and I see when we walk into a home that a regular agent's just not going to see. So I think it's going to become increasingly more important as information becomes more and more available, as artificial intelligence becomes, more and more utilized by the masses. What are you doing differently as a professional to bring value, to your client? And that was one of the reasons I got into, construction and got into building, and, ended up getting licensed. But, you're going to have to bring more value than just, hey, I can sell you a house.
I mean, I can't agree with you more. There's so many different facets that we had talked about, that we talked about on previous podcasts here. One of them being, the Binzer. When you talk about where deals are made or broken,
100%.
Yeah, you got the negotiation. But when you get past that, you got the Binzer.
Yeah.
And if you've got your everyday real estate agent and they get 100 items on a Binzer, how are they actually going to put that whole thing together?
Yeah.
Are they going to make the repairs? If they're not going to make the repairs and they're going to negotiate credit, how would they know what the cost of some of this stuff is if they've never actually been in the trenches and bid out those subs before and have an idea? And that the momentum of the deal would get crushed if they had to go try to figure out 100 different line items.
Big time. And, it's not uncommon even on new construction for, there to be, 50, 100 items that come back on a Binzer. But, for guys like us, when we get that document, we can either say, hey, these are, we really need to dig into these, 3, 4, 5 items. Like, these are things that you need to be concerned about. Don't worry about these other items. We'll get our team in there. We'll knock them out. You don't have to worry about it. But it allows us to represent at a higher level, and negotiate, better deals on behalf of our clients.
No question.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is rarely talked about is, at my core, the name of the podcast is The Investor's Playbook, because I think at my core, I'm an investor.
Yep.
Yeah. The other things that I do are spin-offs of being an investor, and they're really valuable. The fact that you're an investor yourself, what are some of the aspects of being an investor that you think really helps you differentiate from other real estate agents, other builders, and
I think the biggest thing is, we operate in the single family, realm, right? Most people don't look at single family residential as an investment. However, even if someone's just buying their primary residence, for most people, it's the biggest purchase they're ever going to make in their life. So they should be looking at it as an investment. And I think I got into real estate with the intention to, I wanted to be a real estate investor. I wanted to be a developer. I didn't ever have an inkling, to get licensed. That was something that came down the line out of convenience, and, it's grown into, what it is now. But, I think the thing that is different for me, I'm sure you're the same way. When I'm representing clients, I'm looking at everything with, my investor hat on. Is this a solid investment? Is there upside? What are the downside risks? If my client goes to sell in a year versus 5 years or 10 years, what does that exit look like? And I think, again, there's a lot of great real estate agents out there, but as you know, most agents don't. A lot of agents don't even own a house, which is insane to me. But most agents never invest in real estate, which, I don't know how you can represent a client at a high level if you're not putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about kind of, there's a lot of great real estate agents out there. there's a few
Yeah.
good real estate agents that are out there. And I think that the marketplace, I think as we're evolving, is starting to see that. I think they're starting to understand that their agent needs to bring more to the table.
Yeah.
We've talked about on previous episodes that if you were a great investor, as like a hedge fund manager, let's say, and then you go out there and you start to take on capital from other people and invest their money.
Yep.
They want to see that you've got your money in the game. They want to see the type of returns that you've done before they're willing to start to put their millions of dollars with you and say, hey, do this. I mean, I think that same mindset is absolutely what's going to happen in this industry if somebody's looking to buy or sell real estate.
Well, I mean, how do you have credibility as a professional when someone comes to the table and you're not practicing what you preach? There's no other fund structure out there that I'm aware of that, there's going to be external investors that are going to be comfortable putting, their hard-earned money into your fund or into your, investment opportunity if you don't have some skin in the game. In real estate, as real estate agents, as real estate agents goes, like, people are making this huge purchase, yet, the agent doesn't practice what they preach.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to me, but fortunately for you and I, we have a track record. We can show, hey, these are the things we've done. Here's our past projects. Here are the properties we've represented, and built that track record and that credibility. So that definitely helps. When you go to represent people on the agency side, for sure. Yeah.
One of the things that I've talked about, I compare being in business, or especially in real estate, a lot to the medical field. I've talked about it in a lot of podcasts. And one of the things that I've kind of attributed to is if you're looking at a real estate agent, or if you're looking at a plastic surgeon, you want to look at somebody who's actually very successful.
For sure.
And the reason being is if you get your everyday real estate agent and you walk into a house and the couples or whomever it is, the buyer goes, look, I love this house.
Yep.
And it's right on a big street and it's a 2-story and it's all these things, it's west facing and all these things that is a bad investment.
Yeah.
If you're seeing that commission at the end, most likely you want to go, you know what, you love this house? We should write an offer on this house.
Yep.
And it's the same thing of like, you walk into that plastic surgeon's office and you say, look, I think I got this thing wrong with me. What do you think? And if they think, it's not bad at all, they're going to go, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I think we need to tweak that because they're looking to get that commission. They're looking to get that payday.
For sure.
But if you've got that person who's already really successful, whose reputation is paramount to them, they're the ones that's going to be willing to say, look, I understand you love this house, but I just want to make it very clear this is going to be a really bad investment.
Yep.
And here's the reasons it's going to be a bad investment. We're going to have a lot of difficulty selling this thing later. And as long as you go into it with your eyes wide open like that, we can talk about making an offer, but I wouldn't.
Yep.
And I think the same thing that if you went into that plastic surgeon's office and they said, look, the change you want to make is so minute, I don't even know if you'd see the difference. The risk of going under the knife is really high. If you were asking me, I wouldn't do it.
Yep.
And I think that's what you want to hear, and we've talked about that quite a bit. And I think the fact that you get to a certain level of success like we've had, I think that allows you to kind of have that tough conversation when somebody says they like a house or not.
Well, listen, like if you're representing a client, ultimately you're supposed to be a fiduciary, to that person. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a lot of agents, it's their only stream of income. If they have an opportunity to earn a commission, they're going to do everything they can do, to close that transaction. Whereas, for guys like us, we have multiple streams of income. Yes, we make good money selling real estate, but I've been really prideful and intentional in terms of representing people in the way that I relay information and letting them know, okay, these are the positives, these are the negatives, here's the risks, here's the upsides, here's the downsides. Take this information. You ultimately need to make the decision. Here's what I would do if I was in your shoes. But I always tell my clients, like if it's a house that I personally wouldn't buy, I tell them, hey, I mean, if you really want to move forward, I'll help you, but this is not something that I would do. I mean, I think people appreciate that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the real estate side. Let's talk a little bit about the building side.
Let's do it.
So you're obviously developing homes. Kind of what do you see as your niche in the marketplace right now, and kind of why did you attack that niche? There's a lot of people out there who want to get into the development side. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're doing and why.
Yeah. So we have developments going at Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, and Arcadia. And my philosophy from a high level in real estate has always been, to buy in the best locations. So, Main and Main, areas that are highly desirable, good school districts, obviously, we both have built a number of homes in Paradise Valley. Paradise Valley's, kind of creme de la creme in Arizona. There's some great pockets in Scottsdale. There's some great pockets in Arcadia. But, for me, it really has just been about, being patient and purchasing, properties in the right location. There's a lot of developers and a lot of developments going right now on busy streets, that have weird lots, maybe facing the wrong direction, poor design, the whole gamut. But, our focus really has been, like I said, buying in the right locations, building quality products, number one, and, doing a great job with design. And I know you and your wife, do the same thing, and you guys have had a lot of success there as well. But, I think it's very difficult, to lose if you buy correctly. I always say you make your money, on the purchase. If you're buying at the right numbers, buying in the right locations, you're going to put yourself in the best position to have success. There's obviously risk in investing, but if you're doing those two things, I think you put yourself in the best position to have success.
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the misnomers I think in our business is that, people who are investors like us and people who are building can't also represent developers. And I know that I've represented developers. I know that you represent a developer here in town. And I want to talk a little bit about that because, what people think is they think, if you're developing property and somebody else is developing property, you're going to push your property over their property. And what I've tried to explain to them is, look, most of the time, the chances of us having identical properties is almost zero, right? Because your buyers at the ultra high end level are so nuanced as to what they're looking for. Number of bedrooms, architectural style, location, landscape architect, view, school district, all these different things. And the chance of having the same in the same area is almost zero. And at the same time, I think it's like double ending a deal.
Yeah.
Like if you are ethical and somebody was to look at two of them and one of them happened to be yours, I've always joked I would kind of prefer to sell the listing that's not mine. Because then I get paid the commission on that one, and I know mine's going to sell.
Yeah, I know I'm going to sell mine.
So that's how I get really excited is by getting that sort of thing. And I know that you're kind of in that same position sometimes. So speak a little bit about that on kind of how that's been in your career.
Yeah, ultimately, I think it comes down to having a good relationship with who you're representing, and operating with integrity and ethically. The reality is, as you mentioned, most of these buyers at this price point. First of all, let me backtrack. It's almost impossible to have two identical houses. These are custom homes. Floor plans are different. Design's different. Landscape is different. The view corridors are different. And so even if you have two houses in a similar location, the chances of them being that close design-wise and architecturally that a client would look at both is very little.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it just comes down to operating with integrity. And of course, if you get a call on a property you built, you're going to show that property. If that property doesn't work for that client, you're going to present them all the options and allow the client to make the decision. Whether it's your property, another developer's property that you're representing, the client ultimately makes that decision. Our job is to put all of the options in front of them. Explain positives, negatives, all of those things, to the client, and client's ultimately going to make that decision. So there's definitely, both of us do it. There's definitely a world in which, you can be a developer, you can be a builder and represent other developers and builders at a very high level. I understand how someone could have that mindset, but ultimately it just comes down to, representing your client appropriately.
Yeah. So, sometimes we try to kind of talk about our niche, and our niche is we build ultra luxury homes. We do in-house design and kind of, we can be that all encompassing package. We can help you find the lot if we want. We can help you build the house. We can kind of do it all under one roof. What would you see as kind of like your guys' niche and the niche that you want the marketplace to kind of see you as?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that you and Lauren have a similar setup. I think that being vertically integrated and being able to essentially hold the client's hand through acquisition, through sale if they decide to sell it, or move in if they're occupying the property at the end of the day, is a huge value proposition. There's so many moving pieces in development and building, design, going through that whole process. It can be overwhelming even for people that have been through the process, but to have the team of people together to be able to hold the client's hand through the whole process, I think, is a huge value add. And I would say for us, that's kind of our niche is, to be able to be a concierge, for that client throughout the entire process. Most of these people that are buying at this level are either retired and they don't want to deal with it, or they're operating a business at a very high level, and time is valuable.
Yeah, no question.
And so I would say that's our niche. Location wise, again, we're in all of the desirable locations, but our niche, I would say, is being able to help client from A to Z, and make that process as easy as possible for them.
In this business, we obviously are putting our own capital at risk quite often, but there's always going to be investment, capital that's going to come in. And I know that a number of the people that watch the podcast are new, and they're trying to figure out, how do I get into this space, or how do I learn? And that's great. And we've talked about that, but there's big clientele out there. There's a big group of people out there who have been in the investment space for 25, 30, 35 years.
Yep.
And it's incredible how once you get out of the game for a while, how you start to not understand the new nuances of what's going on today.
Yep.
And I think a big reason that we started the podcast is to kind of show some of those investors what the game is like now, as opposed to what it was like, say, 15 or 20 years ago.
Yep.
Knowing that you've kind of been around that yourself, what do you think is the big changes that we've seen from what somebody thinks the market was like 20, 25 years ago to like what it is today?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, once you get removed from anything, we're in a world now where things are progressing so quickly with, technology and AI, that it's really easy to get behind the eight ball if you're not doing it every day. And we have a bit of an unfair advantage, I would say, because we're not only building, but we're also representing, buyers and sellers, and we know what the buyers are looking for. So we're out walking property with, buyer client. We get that feedback, and we're able to implement that on the development side and make sure, we're on par with design. We're on par with, the amenities that people are looking for, in these types of properties. And we're able to deliver a product, I think, that matches the expectation of what, we feel the demographic of active buyers currently in the marketplace are willing to write a check for. And I think that's the piece where if you remove yourself from the game for too long, you may have built phenomenal houses 10, 15 years ago, but you may not know what the right floor plan is. You may not know what amenities people want. You may not know what type of finishes people want, in a home that they're spending that kind of money on. And I think that is really kind of the X factor, that we have, because we're doing it every single day.
Yeah, I've called it the ultimate cheat code.
Yep.
Because we're actually getting the answers to the test.
Correct.
When we're out in the marketplace and we're trying to find a home for one of our buyers, and they're saying, I would be happy to spend $15, $20 million if I had the following.
Yep.
We can't find it. We haven't been able to find it. In my mind, I'm thinking, that's my next spec, especially when I'm hearing it over and over and over again from so many different people.
For sure, 100%.
So one of the most common questions we get from our listeners all the time is, where do you see the market now? Where do you see it kind of, especially in the short term?
Yep.
So kind of what have you been seeing the last maybe 6 months, and where do you think we're going in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think so. The last 6 months, there's definitely been, I think, a fair amount of uncertainty in the market. There's been transactions happening. Transaction volume is down from where it was at its peak, and the challenging piece with that is, like, we had this crazy period, during COVID, and everyone got so used to, transactions happening like that, getting 15 offers on a house, everything selling off market. And then we kind of transitioned back into where we're at right now, which is really a pretty balanced market. But I've seen a huge uptick in activity probably in the last 2-3 weeks. I anticipate, the balance of this year, so Q4 of this year and probably Q1, Q2 of next year to be pretty strong. There's a lot of inventory coming on, as people that are spending that kind of money are coming back to Arizona to spend time here. And so we're kind of moving into selling season here. So anticipate, strong end of the year and hopefully a strong start to next year. So we'll see. But, it's been different than it was during COVID, but, I think we're back kind of in a normal market.
No question. Yeah. I mean, people have to understand the markets are cyclical, and they're not just going to go up forever. They're not going to go down forever.
Correct.
There's going to be some ups and downs, and people always want to talk about, 08, and they'd be like, oh man, what about, and they want to talk about, post-COVID. when it flew. And I said, the better thing to really do is to kind of take those out and just kind of look at the line over the last maybe 25 or 30 years. And that's really what you should be making big financial decisions on, is kind of that trend. And that trend has always been, especially in the Paradise Valley and Scottsdale market, a good trend up.
100%.
We've got so many people moving here from the Midwest, Canada, and now we've got Portland, Seattle, and a lot of California moving here. So all these new buyers, I'm still very bullish on luxury market, Paradise Valley, Scottsdale for sure.
Same here. And, when the market slows down, it creates a buying opportunity for investors. It's a great time to pick up inventory. And, there's a lot of people moving from other parts of the country. As you mentioned, Arizona is becoming a mecca for, ultra wealthy individuals, high level CEOs. There's a lot of manufacturing happening here, a lot of growth on the industrial and commercial side. So, definitely bullish on, the trend here, for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, I've purchased more inventory just in the last really 6 to 8 weeks than I had in the previous 2 years.
Yeah.
Because what I understand is when you have those little bit of lulls in the market, that's when you buy.
Exactly.
So when you're seeing people out there and they're saying, the market's got a little bit uncertain, I don't know what I should do. I'm like, just you telling me that tells me it's time to buy.
For sure.
And if you want to learn from an investor, which is really usually the best source of information, you should be looking to buy right now if you're a homeowner.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I know that you've got some builds going. Talk us about what you've got going, what's coming, when they're going to be finishing up, what our viewers can expect to see from Toon Co.
Yeah, so we're getting ready to break ground on one in Camelback Country Club Estates, actually right behind the one that you just purchased. So super excited about that. We've been working on, plans for that one for too long, but excited to get that one rocking. That's going to be a phenomenal build. So that one will be new construction. We have a couple properties in Scottsdale we're getting wrapped up right now. Both of those I'm keeping. And then we just finished one up in Arcadia that's on the market right now. It's actually the first home with a basement we've done. I grew up in the Midwest, so everybody has basements there. You don't see them here. I think we're going to start seeing more basements. They're not super cost effective to build, as I'm sure you know, but it's a smaller lot, so it's a 15,000 square foot lot in Arcadia proper. And in order to get the square footage we wanted, we had to go down. So I think you're going to start seeing more of that. I love basements. They're great, utilization of space at the right price point, obviously, if it makes sense. But we have those going. Have another place in Paradise Valley we're working on plans for right now. So we got a few in the pipeline, and we've got a bunch of stuff coming from other developers and builders that we represent. We got 5 or 6 properties coming on here towards the end of this year, and probably another 5 to 7 beginning of next year. So got some cool stuff coming. So stay tuned. If you're in the market, let me know. We'll give you a little sneak peek before they come on.
Well, that's great. Yeah. I mean, that people are always looking for new inventory. They always want new.
Yep.
Whether it's a remodel, kind of toll gut remodel, or a new build, that's pretty much what the marketplace, especially at that high end, is really looking for.
And people want what they can't have, right? So if it's not on the market, it becomes a little bit more appealing to them.
Yeah, and as far the two-story you're talking about is in Arcadia, and I think sometimes on this podcast we talk about two-story. That's a 4-letter word. It's bad, but I think what we're mostly talking about is Paradise Valley. I think especially in Paradise Valley, a lot of people look at that house as probably their last house. Even if they're in their 40s or 50s, they think, if I have other properties, I'll probably keep my Arizona house and I'll sell off some of my other properties as I get older.
Yep.
So they don't want that 2-story because they look at that as, unutilized space as they get older. But I think when you're talking about smaller lots in Arcadia, you're talking about people that may have young families and they're looking for space, and they're not really able to get the space on the smaller lot. So I think going down, plus, at a certain age, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of separation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your kids are playing downstairs, you're upstairs.
Yeah. And that's a family house, so it's a perfect setup for a family. Yeah.
Nick, thanks for coming on the podcast today. Really appreciate it. You can view the Investors Playbook on all the major streaming platforms. You can follow us on Instagram or TikTok. We appreciate you watching the episode, and we will see you next Tuesday.